So, as just mentioned, I will be talking about Proto Austroasiatic, second talk on the topic after Paul's talk. So, what are we talking about? Proto Austroasiatic is usually reconstructed with a word template limited to monosyllables and then disyllabic words, disyllabic iambic words with no vowel quality contrast in the so-called presyllable. But in recent discussions of Proto Austroasiatic phonology, the possibility of such vowel contrast were kept open by Paul, but so far no evidence has been adduced in support of such potential contrast. So today we're going to be looking at potential evidence for such contrast. I'll try to make a case for the existence of such contrasts in Proto Austroasiatic, and using basically two types of evidence. I'll discuss this in a while. And one of the implications of my argument is that Proto-Vedic and Proto-Kituic also have to be reconstructed with such contrast. Now, a very quick terminological note. Usually the terms presyllable or minor syllable are used to refer to the unstressed first syllable of iambic disyllables in Austroasiatic languages. But because I wanted to avoid making collective assumptions about the status of these syllables at a Proto Austroasiatic stage, I use the expression non-final syllables, which is maybe a bit awkward sometimes. But I think there are some cases where those, what are now the pre-syllables in the attested Austroasiatic languages, go back to former compounds. So that's why I wanted to avoid to use those when referring to Proto Austroasiatic. Let's quickly talk about the challenges involved in such work. Because of iambicity, there has been a strong tendency to reduce phonological material to the left of the main syllable in the Austroasiatic languages of mainland Southeast Asia. And this tendency has been going on for centuries, if not thousands of years. And in addition to this challenge, we also have various processes, like morphological processes, that complicate comparison when we're talking about the presyllable. So prefixation, infixation, and compounding with subsequent reducing, reduction of the first member of the compounds, all these adds or modify phonological material to the left of the main syllable, which makes this part of the word unstable diachronically, and as a result, it's notoriously difficult to reconstruct what is to the left of the main syllable. And not just at the Proto Austroasiatic level, but sometimes even within branches, like at rather lower levels, sometimes between dialects of the same language, we have disagreements when it comes to those pre-syllables. So that's the challenging context in which we're asking the question of whether Proto Austroasiatic had vowel quality contrast in the non-final syllables. We'll be looking at two different types of evidence. What I call direct evidence. Maybe it's a bit of a misnomer. Direct would mean that I have recordings of Proto Austroasiatic, but I lost the hard drive, so we don't have direct evidence. But what I mean is actually that the vowel in the presyllable or the non-final syllable is preserved. And we find this in what we could call peripheral branches outside of mainland Southeast Asia. We find this in Old Mon inscriptions. And then in Kituic and Vedic, we have a few languages, upland conservative languages that have such contrast. And then what is perhaps more interesting, we also have indirect evidence in the form of traces left on other segments. So cases of metaphony where, for example, U in the presyllable causes rounding, so A becomes O in the main syllable, or A becomes E after E, and also changes in the consonants with palatalization, for example. Today I will rely mostly on Kituic, Vedic, and Munda, and some kind of triangulation between those branches. Now, so far, pre-syllable vowel contrasts have not been reconstructed for Proto-Gaelic, and also not reconstructed for Proto-Kituic, although Ryan Garman discussed the issue a few years ago and kept the possibility open, basically, that Proto-Kituic had such contrasts. But we can probably reconstruct that for Munda. Anyway, so to recapitulate what I just mentioned, here we have a map, and you see that it's mostly those languages outside of mainland Southeast Asia that have those contrasts. Then we have Old Mon. It's not found in later stages of the Mon language or in Yahkur. And you have those languages which are kind of spoken in the same area, like of those two branches, Kituic and Gaelic. And that was when we're talking about open pre-syllables. With closed pre-syllables, we have almost no languages that have such contrast. So today I will mostly focus on words with open non-final syllables, although there will also be two examples with closed syllables. I will focus on words, especially with U, a little bit with E, and I'm not talking about words where we could maybe reconstruct A, because it's difficult to contrast those with maybe zero or a schwa, and also we don't really have indirect evidence because A is not the kind of vowel that has an effect on other segments. Typically, it doesn't cause rounding or palatalization, so I'm not going to be talking about this vowel. Also, I'm trying to exclude words in which it could be argued that there was a phonological conditioning environment. So the word for thigh could be argued that there was a U in the pre-syllable, but because there is a bilabial stop just before, and there's also a round vowel in the main syllables, at least in some languages, it could be dismissed easily as being phonologically conditioned. So I will avoid adducing evidence from such words. Okay, finally, attempted. First example, the word for leaf, which is widespread through the family. It's usually reconstructed like sla or something like this, but there is both direct and indirect evidence for reconstructing U in the non-final syllable. So as you can see in Kituic, you have Kako and Bru that have U. Gaelic also have a few languages that have this vowel. Munda also has it. So we have three. Okay, Kituic and Gaelic are spoken, in the same area, kind of, but Munda is in a totally different location. So contact is not an explanation here, obviously. Now in Kmuic, we have an interesting thing going on where there's an unexplained anomaly in vowel correspondences. We would expect a long A in all the languages. So Kmu has Kla, Hong has La, and we would expect also A in Labri, Pra in Mal, but instead we have O in the final syllable. And within a purely Kmuic context, it's difficult to make sense of this correspondence. It's irregular. But in the light of what we just saw in these three other branches, it would make sense to reconstruct the Proto-Kmuic form Sula, and then the rounding from A to O can be explained by metaphony, progressive metaphony. Unfortunately, I don't have parallel cases, like other cases like this in Kmuic, but it would be nice to have other examples. Interestingly, Thurgood reconstructed Sula for Proto-Chamic, but in the forms that he cited, there was no U, so I'm not sure why. I mean, it wasn't really, or maybe someone can correct me later on or explain why he reconstructed U. But anyway, now I'm going to talk about two words. And I'm first going to talk about direct evidence, and then we're going to talk about the indirect evidence together for different words together. The word for tiger. Wait, did I miss something? No. Okay. I think there's a slide that disappeared where there were the reconstructions. Anyway, so we have again U in Ketuic, in Munda, Viedic. The Viedic forms are maybe related, but it's not 100% sure. If they're related, they're also kind of metathesis. Oh, I think I deleted the wrong slide. And I still have the slide where when I was timing myself. Now I understand what happened. So it's even worse than, okay. Next word, the word for wind, which I also reconstruct with U. It's been usually reconstructed without this U. Silhouette reconstructs two variants, but I think that if we have U in the pre-syllable, we don't need to have two variants. So again, Ketuic, we have this U, Viedic, and Munda. Now, what is interesting with those two words, the word for tiger and the word for wind, is that they are among the words that are, okay, great. I should be at the 10-minute mark, great. They are among the words that are affected by two interesting phenomena. The first one is West Banaric raising, and the second one is Viedic progressive rounding metaphony, whereby a pre-Viedic becomes pro-Viedic O. Now, we don't have enough examples to really be able to speak of sound laws, but still, those are recurrent phenomena that we observe in a few words. So let's talk about the first phenomenon, this West Banaric raising. In a few axioma, West Banaric languages have typically the vowel U or U, where other Banaric and Austroasiatic languages generally have the vowel A. The phenomenon was discussed by Silwell and Jack in 2003, and then again Silwell and Howe in 2015, but no conditioning environment was found. So this is what we're dealing with. So for example, in Dru or Laven, we have forms like Klua, Thrue, Kyul, as opposed to Banor, Kla, Frai, or Kial. And there are at least two potential explanations for the raising. Either it was caused by the vowel, which was still preserved in Proto-West Banaric or pre-Proto-West Banaric, and this high vowel caused the raising. Or second explanation, which I tend to favor, but it would be a whole topic in and of itself. If Proto-Banaric was a register language, as I suggested last year, and so had a contrast between a tense and a last register, those formerly disyllabic words would have reduced, and there would have been a change from tense register to lax register, and then this lax register would have caused the A to raise. But maybe we can discuss this in the Q&A session, because don't have time for this right now. So next phenomenon, Viedic progressive rounding metaphony. As far as I'm aware, it's never been discussed in the literature, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. We can discuss this later. It seems that in a few Etsima Viedic languages have the vowel O or another back vowel in the main syllable, where languages of other branches typically have A. And two of these words are among those undergoing the A raising in West Banaric. And so we're dealing with a case of progressive metaphony, going all the way back to Proto-Viedic, where U in the pre-syllable caused A in the main syllable to round to O, or so I believe. Let's go back to the word for wind. We have O or similar vowels throughout Viedic, so it reconstructs all the way to Proto-Viedic. And the word for maggot, same thing. Unfortunately, we don't have languages like Arem or Ruk or Mai don't have these roots, so but still. Okay, I have 5 minutes or something. Yeah. Okay, so I have to speed up a little bit. There seems to be indications that some disyllabic words in which a vowel E or U in the non-final syllable can be reconstructed are in fact formal compounds. And here it's going to be maybe debatable, but I want to suggest those two reconstructions or something close to that. Kill ag for crow and kill lang for bird of prey. I'm going to explain why I want to reconstruct this. And this would be made with the compounds where the first element is actually a class term for birds and flying animals. What would be the evidence for this? So it's reconstructed or something like this, but I think there's evidence for a syllable kill. First, we have old mon with kill a or kill a, and besides old mon, Khmer might be preserving evidence of e in the form of first syllable, because we can reconstruct a long a. We find a, long a in almost all the Austroasiatic languages, but Khmer has a raised vowel. So modern Khmer a, but it would have been ke in Old Khmer, and I think it's unaccounted for, this raising. Now, if we look at the next bird, unfortunately, it's not found in Old Mon, so we don't have direct evidence, but I still think we have indications for this first syllable. That we can draw a parallel with Kilak and also other birds and flying animals that I will discuss in a while. Again, it's all like there's no question that we need to reconstruct a long A, but here we have a few languages that have raised reflexes. Khmer again, and other languages, and Bolu has this glide here, which is difficult to account for if we didn't have like E in the first syllable, and then the whole Cassian branch also has raised reflex. So in Cassian, it goes back all the way to the Proto language. So, okay, I have to go a bit faster, but we have other words that seem to have a similar element. So the word for bat in Old Mon is kilwa, still found in Modern Mon. The word for bird, which is usually just something like jem or tim or same or sim in Austroasiatic languages, it has this extra element in Old Mon, which could potentially go back to the compound kiltem. And then, yeah, other examples of birds and flying animals with this kl. That's the beginning, like in Aslian, like Jahai Kluang, Semnam Kluang, flying fox. So this would mean that originally Kil Ak and Kil Lang would have been specifying compounds. What is obvious, what is clear is that this Ak refers to the sound of the bird, and it's still found with this meaning, like for example in Khmu, Ak Ak, sound of a crow. So literally, this would have meant, like Kil Ak would have meant the bird which makes the sound. Okay, now discussion and conclusion. We saw that there are arguments to reconstruct both E and U in at least a few etiema. And we saw that this also implies that Proto-Vietic and Proto-Kluic had preserved such contrasts. And yeah, we left the question outside, but it probably also has to be reconstructed. Much more analytic work remains to be done to identify the nature and potential sources of these vowels on a word-to-word basis. So in some cases, we could have a real phonological vowel, not phonologically conditioned and not a morpheme or part of a morpheme. In other words, the vowel was part of a monomorphemic disyllable. We could also be dealing, as we just saw, with the vowel, the main vowel of the first word of an original compound. In some case, this could be morphology. Or maybe it was phonologically predictable. Maybe there was a rule in Proto Austroasiatic that, in the word for leaf, a sequence had to be, there was a phonetic U in between. There was some rule, but that we don't know of. So this could explain also some cases. Something interesting are some correspondences which suggests that perhaps U in some cases is the vocalization of a nasal or some allophone of a nasal, because, for example, the word for charcoal is kucha in Bro Tako, but in Khmu it's kensa. And then, we saw the maggot Timon before. And so reconstructed with U to explain the different phenomena we discussed. But in Khmu it's Mbrai and bit Snrai with the nasal. So a bit intriguing. And also the causative infix in Old Mon is U, but it's typically a vowel in many Austroasiatic languages. And there could be other explanations. So to conclude, there is maybe not strong evidence, but good evidence to reconstruct the specific vowel quality in the non-final syllable of various Austroasiatic edema. But I think it's too early to make generalizations about this and to draw firm conclusions about the Proto-Austroasiatic word templates or about the number of potential vowels in this part of the word. Due to the nature of the data at our disposal and the challenges it presents us with, we will likely never reach a comprehensive understanding of Proto-Austroasiatic non-final syllables. And I think that in many cases, even if there was a distinct vowel in Proto-Austroasiatic, it's just not reconstructible. It's beyond our reach, beyond science, because we just have insufficient data, because we need the vowel to have been preserved in select languages and to have left a trace otherwise. And that's not always the case. And because these vowels likely have diverse origins, these will have to be studied on an individual basis and on a word by word basis. So we need to combine both detailed historical phonology of each branch and each language with a broad view of the whole family. In other words, to combine bottom-up and top-down approaches. And I think that beyond expanding and improving our model of the Proto-Austroasiatic word, this kind of work can also potentially explain various phenomena, various unsolved problems in Austroasiatic historical linguistics. So thank you for your attention, and questions and remarks are very much appreciated.